Grandmother brought back from the old home my distant orphaned cousin Su Qingling, who had been living under someone else's roof. Her poetry was bold, not reserved and restrained like young ladies from noble families. Grandfather praised her for having spirit, and my cousins all loved to brew tea and discuss philosophy with her. Even my fiancé Shen Shuju, the top scholar, only said with his mouth that she didn't respect propriety, but whenever she was present at poetry gatherings, he couldn't help but loudly exchange verses with her. Until that Chuanglin banquet, when in front of all the court nobles, he gave her the pine smoke ink that the Shen family passes down to the future lady of the house, but shoved into my hands a cracked ink stick he'd bought at the last minute. I watched the touching scene of him and Su Qingling as kindred spirits meeting, and slowly said, "This engagement, let's call it off." The gentle smile on his face froze, his tone carrying a hint of anger. "You would actually break off our engagement over a mere ink stick." Tonight is the Chuanglin banquet, the celebration banquet. The emperor is holding for the newly appointed scholars, and also the most glorious moment in my fiancé Shin Shuzu's life. He wore the top scholar's red robe, rode a tall horse, paraded through the streets for 3 days, his glory unmatched. As the legitimate daughter of the prime minister's manor, the future wife of the top scholar, I sat at the head of the women's seating area, receiving the envious gazes of ladies and young misses from various families. I nodded slightly, maintaining the dignified and proper manner befitting a daughter of the prime minister's manor. My gaze passed over the crowd and fell upon that high-spirited man. He was surrounded by a group of scholars and literati, composing poetry and exchanging verses, looking spirited and animated. Just then, a clear female voice cut through the harmonious atmosphere. Though the top scholar's line is good, it lacks some backbone and inevitably falls into cliché. Everyone present was shocked. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked in the direction of the voice. It was indeed her, Su Qingling. Today she wore a plain white long dress, without makeup, yet somehow amidst the hall full of splendor, she displayed a somewhat pitiable backbone. She shouldn't have been here at all. The women's seats at the Chuanglin banquet were all for family members of important court officials. I figured some soft-hearted cousin must have secretly brought her in again. Shen Shuju's brows furrowed at first, but once he saw who it was, a trace of admiration actually flashed in his eyes. "Oh, please enlighten me, Miss Qingling." Su Qingling showed no stage fright and recited loudly in front of all the powerful officials. Why not say, "I wish to take the sword at my waist and go straight to slay the Lulan"? A man's ambition lies in all directions. How can he always be trapped in romance and frivolity? The whole hall erupted in applause. Even the several grand scholars at the head table stroked their beards and nodded, praising her with what courage. Shen Shuju's eyes completely lit up. The way he looked at Su Qingling was with a burning passion and infatuation I had never seen before, as if he had met his one and only soulmate in this life. He strode over to Su Qingling, and the two of them started talking animatedly as if no one else existed, from poetry and literature to matters of state and the world. I, his officially betrothed fiancé, was left aside, becoming a complete and utter joke. The guests around us, their gazes wandering back and forth between me and Su Qingling. In those gazes, there was sympathy, there was pity, but more than that was the schadenfreude of watching a good show. After all, she is from some backwater, doesn't know the rules. But the top scholar just eats this up. Look at those eyes of his. The prime minister's daughter is dignified, all right, but she is kinda boring. How can she compare to this Miss Su in terms of interest? These voices were neither loud nor soft, just enough to drill into my ears. My fingernails dug into my palms. At the height of it all, someone egged them on. The top scholar and Miss Su are so well matched, they should drink a toast. Why not give her a token and make it a beautiful tale for the literary world? Shen Shuju laughed heartily 3 times and actually took something out from his sleeve. It was an ink stick, entirely jet black with a fine texture, the Shen family's heirloom pine smoke ink that was only passed down to the future matriarch of the family. He had described to me countless times how precious this ink stick was. But at this moment, he handed it to Su Qingling without hesitation. a gift for my kindred spirit. Su Qingling took it with tears in her eyes, deeply moved. Top scholar, this gift is too precious. Shen Shuju looked at her tenderly. You are worth it. The atmosphere in the entire venue was pushed to its peak. He seemed to only then remember me, turned around and casually picked up another ink stick from the book boy's tray, then quickly walked over to me. Jiyuan, this one's for you. I lowered my eyes to look. It was a piece of ink you could find anywhere on the market, and there was even a clear crack along the edge. Me heart. In that moment, shattered just like this ink. I didn't take it. I just raised my head, meeting his somewhat perfunctory gaze, and spoke softly, yet with utmost clarity. This engagement, let's forget it. The gentle smile on his face instantly froze. The surrounding clamor seemed to have hit the pause button. He lowered his voice, his tone carrying a hint of anger and disbelief. Xiao Juyan, you would actually break off our engagement over a mere piece of ink. Why are you so petty and inconsiderate of the bigger picture? I turned and left my seat, heading towards the back garden, seeking some peace and quiet. The cold wind brushed against my face, dispersing some of the restlessness in my heart, but couldn't blow away the humiliation that penetrated to my bones. Behind me came the sound of light footsteps. Cousin. It was Su Qingling. She caught up to me, still clutching that piece of pine soot ink tightly in her hand. As soon as she reached me, her eyes turned red, on the verge of tears. Cousin, please don't blame the top scholar. It is all my fault. Blame me for getting carried away and not knowing my place, which caused a rift between the top scholar and you. She retreats to advance, showing weakness in every sentence. But in reality, every word is showing off how irresistible the spiritual connection between her and Shen Shuju is. Her words are like a soft knife. Translated, they mean, we're the ones meant for each other. You, as his fiancé, don't understand him at all. When she speaks, she is always deliberately or unconsciously rubbing the ink stick in her hand, while the corner of her eye keeps glancing toward the corridor not far away. I know that Shen Shuju is right there. She is putting on a show of being magnanimous and compromising for him to see. Too bad. I am not her audience. I can't even be bothered to look at her tear-stained face. My gaze only falls coldly on the ink stick in her hand. Cousin's talent is indeed extraordinary. I say indifferently. Even things that don't belong to you, you can hold them so shamelessly. The color instantly drains from Su Qingling's face. She probably didn't expect that I, who has always been dignified and dull, would say something so direct and cutting. She mumbles with her lips, unable to say a word for a long time, and I no longer have the patience to continue this charade with her. It is late at night. Cousin has a weak constitution. You should go back early. Having said that, I walk past her and go straight ahead completely, ignoring how she looks behind me, instantly breaking down, tears streaming down like rain, looking so pitiful. I know that this appearance will precisely fall into someone's eyes, stirring up his endless pity and protective instinct. Sure enough, I hadn't taken more than a few steps when someone forcefully grabbed my wrist. It was Shen Shuju. He had chased after me, his face full of anger and disappointment. Xiao Juyan, why must you be so aggressive? He pulled me behind a decorative rock formation away from others' sight. You disappoint me so much. His voice was filled with anguished accusations. Qingling and I are merely noble friends, kindred spirits in talent and character. Like high mountains and flowing water, how rare to find such a soulmate. Why must you use such vulgar and unbearable perspectives to taint this pure friendship? He stood on the moral high ground, defining my humiliation as worldliness and jealousy. As the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion, destined to be the matriarch of the clan, you should be my virtuous helpmate, clearing away my worries from behind. Why are you so petty today? So lacking in magnanimity? Acting like this will only make outsiders think you are jealous, damage my reputation, and bring shame to the Prime Minister's mansion. Every sentence pierced the heart, as if the wrongs I suffered had somehow become my fault. I didn't argue like I used to. Because I knew that you can't reason with someone pretending to be asleep. I just looked at him calmly, even coldly, looking at this man I once thought was gentle as Jade, who would walk hand in hand with me through life. Shen Shuju for the first time. I called him by his full name. His body stiffened slightly. I clearly saw a flash of shock in his eyes. I slowly, word by word, asked him, "Your so-called gentlemanly friendship, does it have to be achieved by trampling on my dignity? Your nobility comes at too high a price, and I just so happen to be unable to afford it anymore." Having said that, I forcefully shook off his hand and walked toward the carriage back to the manor without looking back. What happened at the Qingling banquet spread throughout the capital overnight. My words about calling off the engagement caused an even bigger uproar. Early the next morning, I was summoned by grandmother to Cian Hall. Grandmother dismissed the attendants, took my hand with a look of earnest concern on her face. "Yuan Yuan, what foolish thing are you doing? Scholar Shen is a rare genius that comes once in a century, favored by the new emperor with limitless prospects. Having such a son-in-law for our prime minister's manor is icing on the cake." Her words were full of weighing pros and cons, not a single sentence showing concern for whether I had been wronged. Making a fuss about breaking off the engagement over such a trivial matter if word gets out, it is our prime minister's manor that loses face. I remained silent, my heart growing colder bit by bit, seeing. I wasn't speaking, grandmother changed to a conciliatory tone. "Good child, grandmother knows you are upset. But men, especially talented scholars like Scholar Shen, all like something fresh and novel. That girl Qingling does have some talent, and is indeed quite bold. As the future wife of the top scholar, you must have the magnanimity to tolerate others. Only then can the family be harmonious in the future, and your father can have another capable assistant in the imperial court." She glossed over the serious parts, defining Shen Shuju's humiliation as a talented scholar's romantic flair, packaging my dignity as the family's greater cause. I finally raised my head and looked at grandmother. I still maintained the respect and courtesy of a junior, but my tone brooked no argument, grandmother. What father taught me is that husband and wife are one, sharing honor and disgrace together. If he has no place for me in his heart and doesn't know how to respect me, then no matter how bright his future is, to me it is nothing but an endless abyss. I, Xiao Zhuyan, will never jump into such an abyss. Grandmother was stunned. She probably never imagined that I, who had always been meek, would be so resolute. Her face darkened. "Are you going to defy your elders over such a trivial matter?" I answered calmly. "I just don't want to wrong myself anymore." Unable to reason with grandmother, pressure from the family came flooding in like a tide. I claimed illness and stayed behind closed doors. But the gossip from outside still penetrated through the layers of mansion walls and reached my ears. The public opinion in the capital was almost one-sided. The prime minister's daughter is jealous and can't tolerate a mere orphan girl truly unbecoming of a prestigious family. Top scholar Shen and the talented lady Su are a match made in heaven, yet they're bound by a marriage contract. How tragic and lamentable. In the end, Miss Xiao is mediocre in talent and doesn't deserve the status and character of the top scholar. These words became the hottest topic of conversation in the poetry gatherings and tea houses throughout the capital. A few days later, I was invited to attend a poetry gathering at the Marquis of Yongling's estate. The familiar noble ladies gathered around me, ostensibly to comfort me, but in reality every sentence was meant to dissuade me. "Jiwen, why bother? For someone like top scholar Shen, having a few female confidants around him is also an elegant affair. That is right. Take a step back and the world opens up. If you make too much of a fuss, you'll hurt your relationship with the top scholar and damage the prime minister's manor's dignity." Even several of my cousins came to try to persuade me. "Little sister, brother Shen, isn't that kind of person. He was just momentarily captivated by her talent. Don't overthink it. Don't hurt a scholar's dignity." All of them were urging me to be magnanimous. As if not being magnanimous was my fault. I sat among them, expressionless, listening to these consolations. The teaspoon in my hand unconsciously stirred the clear tea in the cup. The tea leaves floated and tumbled in the boiling water, and finally powerlessly sank to the bottom of the cup. Just like my state of mind at this moment, it was my turn to compose a poem. I picked up the brush. Suddenly, my hand paused. A drop of thick ink fell from the brush tip, staining an entire sheet of fine rice paper, just like my tainted engagement, which could never be salvaged. I put down the brush. In my heart, I had already made a decision. To resolve this scandal, grandmother took charge and arranged a family banquet at the Prime Minister's manor, inviting Shen Shuju over under the pretense of giving the younger generation a chance to explain things clearly and reconcile. At the family banquet, father and mother, grandfather and grandmother, as well as several uncles and cousins were all present. Shen Shuju saw that my family members were all there, and most of them were on his side, thinking I was already a bird in a cage, with nowhere to escape. He thought the earlier public opinion manipulation and family pressure were enough to make me submit. After 3 rounds of drinks, he stood up and gave a deep bow to my parents and grandparents, uncle, aunt, grandfather, grandmother. This matter all started because of Shuju. Shuju is here to apologize to Zhujuan. His words were pretty, and his posture was humble. Aya's satisfied smile appeared on grandmother's face. However, his next words made the air in the entire hall freeze. The marriage between Zhujuan and I absolutely cannot be changed. It is just, he paused, turned his gaze toward me with a self-righteous air of deep affection and a perfect solution. Miss Qingling and I are true kindred spirits. A scholar spends his whole life seeking a kindred spirit without success. Now that I've been fortunate enough to find one, I really don't want to let her down. I humbly beg uncle and aunt to grant this. In the future, allow me to keep her in a separate residence under the title of confidante, where I can regularly consult with her about poetry and literature, fulfilling a beautiful tale in the literary world for us too. He finished speaking with complete confidence, as if he had proposed such an elegant, perfect solution. He even thought I should be grateful for his unwavering devotion. Everyone's gaze was focused on me. Grandmother's eyes were urging. My cousin's eyes took it for granted. Even my mother, who had always doted on me, showed a hint of difficulty in her eyes. They were waiting for me to nod, waiting for me to make that decision to consider the big picture. I slowly stood up from my seat. Under everyone's gaze, I took out from my bosom that finest jade pendant with the auspicious dragon and phoenix design that he had given me when we got engaged. I didn't bring it to the last poetry gathering, so I took this chance to find it. Then I raised my hand. Crack, a crisp, shattering sound echoed throughout the entire flower hall. The jade pendant at my feet shattered into several pieces. Everyone was stunned. The confidence on Shen Shuju's face instantly turned into shock and embarrassment. I looked at him, word by word. My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for everyone to hear clearly. Shen Shuju, you can keep your literary world's beautiful romance to yourself. This marriage with the top scholar I've already said. I paused, looked around at my equally shocked family members, and finally rested my gaze on my father. I am not doing it. The entire room fell into deathly silence. The shattered jade pendant lay quietly on the cold floor, like an insurmountable chasm. Grandmother trembled all over with anger, pointing at me, unable to speak for a long while. You unfilial daughter." Shen Shuju's face alternated between pale and flushed, both humiliated and furious. "Xiao Zhuan, you are being so unreasonable." At this tense moment, father, who had been silent all along, slowly put down the teacup in his hand. The teacup met the table surface, making a soft tap sound. The sound wasn't loud, but it brought all the commotion to an abrupt halt. Father Xiaocheng, the current prime minister, had always been one to keep his emotions hidden. But at this moment, I saw in his eyes a bottomless chill. He didn't look at me, nor at grandmother. His gaze, like a sharp sword, shot straight toward Shen Shuju, Champion Shen. He spoke, his voice terrifyingly calm. "The Xiao family prides itself on upright family values, and the daughter we've raised only understands the principle of one partner for life. This literary romance you speak of is too refined. Our Xiao family's threshold is too small to accommodate it." Yuan Yuan has thrown down the token, which means she has severed all attachment. From now on, the engagement is off. You marry yours, she marries hers, neither concerns the other. His words were resounding and firm, leaving no room for negotiation. He was backing me up, declaring his stance to everyone. Shen Shuju's face turned completely pale. He probably never imagined that the Prime Minister, always known for his accommodating nature, would be so unsparing over his daughter's marriage. Uncle, this is just Jiyuan speaking in anger. You father raised his hand and cut him off. Champion scholar, please leave. This was an order to leave. Shen Shuju wanted to say something more, but under father's cold gaze, he couldn't utter a single word. In the end, he could only fling his sleeves in embarrassment, and filled with humiliation and unwillingness, left in anger. After he left, father turned his gaze to me. In that gaze, there wasn't a trace of blame, only heartache. Yuan Yuan, you've been wronged. As long as father is here, from now on, no one will dare force you again. At that moment, the tears I had held back for many days finally burst forth. The matter of breaking off the engagement with father's forceful intervention was settled. The gossip in the capital also changed direction overnight. No one dared call me jealous anymore, only dared to say Shen Shuzu had poor fortune. For the sake of so-called reputation, the Shen family and grandmother's side could only grit their teeth and hastily arrange the marriage between Shen Shuzu and Su Qingling. I heard the wedding was very rushed and quite desolate. After that, I fell ill. It wasn't heartache, but rather my body's natural reaction after the suppressed emotions from this period were finally released. After recovering from the illness, I felt as if I had been reborn. I no longer confined myself to the inner quarters, nor did I bother with those boring poetry gatherings. Father seemed to intentionally cultivate me, and began showing me the account books of some family businesses. Only then did I learn that our family's silk and tea business in Jiangnan had recently encountered some troubles. Due to the rerouting of the canal transport, goods couldn't circulate smoothly, resulting in severe backlog. I spent 7 days and 7 nights, going through nearly 10 years' worth of account books and maps of the Jiangnan waterways. On the 8th day, I walked into my father's study with a detailed proposal. I proposed abandoning part of the grain transport route, switching to inner river waterways that were riskier but shorter, cooperating with the largest escort agency along the way, while also opening up land routes as a supplement. Father looked at my proposal, his eyes full of surprise and relief. Good, very good. My child has real talent for governance. He immediately made the decision to hand over the Jiangnan business entirely to me. Once my world consisted only of a small embroidery chamber and hopes for my future husband. But now, when I turned my gaze toward that vast world, I realized how ridiculous it was to imprison myself for a man. To solve the problem of greasing palms at checkpoints along the inner river waterways, I personally went to the largest tea house in the capital suburbs, Yuelai Tea House. This was a place where merchants from north and south gathered information. I changed into understated men's clothing, and in a private room on the 2nd floor, I sipped tea while listening to merchants from all over discussing matters loudly below. As it happened, what they were discussing was the court's newly established Grain Transport Supervision Office. Supposedly, the one supervising this matter was the current emperor's most trusted and most incorruptible brother, Prince Chen, Chu Yan. I heard Prince Chen is reorganizing the grain transport this time, planning to restructure all the checkpoints along the way, cutting off many people's sources of income. Exactly, for small merchants like us, it is probably going to be even harder from now on. I was listening when the door of the private room was pushed open from outside. A man wearing a dark brocade robe with handsome features and an imposing aura walked in. The guard following behind him had a token at his waist with the character Chen prominently carved on it. It is him. The tea house manager was so scared he nearly knelt down, and I also stood up to pay my respects. Prince Chen Chu Yan merely waved his hand lightly, but his gaze fell on the waterway map and proposal spread out before me. You are studying grain transport. His voice was deep, carrying a hint of inquiry. Your Highness, This commoner girl's family does some business, and I am troubled by this matter," I answered frankly. He picked up my proposal and just stood there, flipping through it page by page. The more he read, the more appreciation showed between his brows. Abandoning grain transport, finding an alternative path, removing the firewood from under the pot, what bold insight. He put down the proposal and looked at me directly for the first time. "What is your name? From the Chancellor's Manor, Shaojuan." He was slightly taken aback, then smiled knowingly. That smile dispelled the coldness surrounding him, like ice and snow beginning to melt. "So it is you." While I was making big moves, opening up new horizons for the family business. Shen Shuju and Su Qingling's heavenly romance also finally descended into the mortal world. Su Qingling's unrestrained talent was elegant at poetry gatherings, but in the inner quarters of the top scholar's mansion, it was a disaster. She didn't know how to manage the household, wasn't good at socializing, and even more so, disdained dealing with those vulgar officials' wives. Aunts, when the wife of the Minister of Personnel came to visit, she actually talked at length right in front of her about how woman needn't be confined to the inner quarters, making that lady so angry she stormed off on the spot. Because of this, Shen Shuju was given a hard time by the Minister of Personnel several times, and his days at the Hanlin Academy became extremely difficult. And father's lesson also came right on schedule. Several important document compilations, Shen Shuju was excluded for various reasons. He had the talent of a top scholar, but nowhere to use it, and his path to promotion was nowhere in sight. The huge gap between ideals and reality left him mentally and physically exhausted. Returning home, what he faced wasn't gentle comfort, but Su Qingling's accusations about "you don't understand me" and "you've become vulgar." The romance of the past had turned into quarrels over daily necessities. The so-called meeting of kindred spirits ultimately couldn't withstand the messy reality of social obligations. He began to miss how good I was, missing how I managed his life perfectly in order, missing how I could chat and laugh with the ladies of various families, paving the way for his official career. He began to regret it. Interactions with Prince Chen Chu-yan became more and more frequent. He seemed very interested in my business acumen, often running into me by chance to discuss the pros and cons of water transport and trade route expansion. We talked about business, then people's livelihood, and then the political situation at court. I discovered he wasn't as cold and ruthless as the rumors suggested, but rather someone who truly cared about the world and had great ambitions. He was equally surprised that I, a sheltered lady, could have such insightful understanding of current affairs. The way he looked at me held no contempt, no amazement, only pure equal appreciation and respect. This feeling made me very comfortable. One day we played chess at the Yixin Pavilion outside the city. When the game ended, he looked at me and suddenly spoke. "This king is very curious. How could a woman like you have ever fallen for someone like Shen Shuju, a fame-seeking hypocrite?" My hand holding the chess piece paused for a moment, then I smiled faintly. "Young and foolish, I mistook fish eyes for pearls. That is all. Fortunately, broken is broken. Only by throwing away the trash can you free your hands to pick up true treasure." He looked at me deeply, a smile curling at the corner of his lips. Well said. After that day, rumors spread from the palace. His Majesty intended to play matchmaker between Prince Chen and the Prime Minister's residence. Shen Shuju also heard the rumors. He completely panicked. He tried every means possible and blocked my carriage on my way back to the residence. He had lost weight and looked much more haggard, no longer showing the high spirits from when he topped the imperial examination. Juanhe stood outside the carriage, his voice hoarse, with a trace of pleading. "Can we talk? I didn't get out of the carriage, just had the driver stop. Lord Shen, between us, there has long been nothing to talk about." My voice through the carriage curtain was cold and distant. "No, that is not it," he urgently explained. "Zheyuan, I was wrong before. I was possessed. I couldn't tell the difference between momentary admiration and lasting companionship. Qingling, she doesn't understand me at all. Only you are the most suitable, virtuous wife for me." How ridiculous. Back then he found me dull and boring, said I didn't understand his romantic pursuits. Now, after being beaten bloody by reality, he turns back around to praise my virtue and propriety. What he loves has never been me, but the status of wife of the top scholar that could bring him the greatest benefit, Lord Shen. I finally lifted the carriage curtain and looked at him coldly. You tossed me away like worn-out shoes back then, and now you want to pick me back up. Don't you think it is too late? I, Xiao Zhuan, never look back at things I've discarded, and please have some self-respect. Having said that, I lowered the carriage curtain. Let's go. The carriage slowly started moving, leaving his face filled with regret and despair far behind. 3 days later, the imperial edict of bestowed marriage was grandly delivered to the Prime Minister's residence. I, Xiao Zhuan, legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's manor, have been granted a marriage to Chen Wang Chu Yan as his principal consort. 1 month later, the wedding, when the news spread, the entire capital was in an uproar. From a discarded woman with a broken engagement, I leaped to become the noble Chen Wang consort. This world of difference shattered countless people's expectations. Those who once urged me to be magnanimous and mocked me for being jealous all fell silent, and instead prepared generous gifts to come to the Prime Minister's manor to congratulate me. Grandmother was so delighted she couldn't stop smiling, holding my hand and saying over and over, "Our Yuan Yuan is truly blessed." I only smiled, saying nothing. My fortune wasn't earned through patience and yielding, but by myself, earned after I personally severed that rotten past. On the wedding day, a 10-li bridal procession stretched from the Prime Minister's manor all the way to Chen Wang's manor. He wore the magnificent formal robes of a Wang consort, stepping one by one onto the phoenix palanquin carried by 16 people. Along the way, there were deafening cheers from the people. I heard people discussing, "This is the new Chen Wang consort. What a grand spectacle. You are telling me I heard she used to be Scholar Shen's fiancé. Shh, don't mention that unlucky bastard. I heard Scholar Shen offended the Prime Minister, and now he can barely stay at the Hanlin Academy. That wife of his is also quite restless, showing herself in public all day long. She is about to become the laughingstock of the capital." These sounds drift into my ears, but can no longer stir even the slightest ripple in my heart. Shen Shuju, Su Qingling, these 2 names, to me, have long been like dust from a past life. My future lies ahead, with that man who wore princely robes, rode a tall horse, and personally came to meet me. When Chu Yan lifted me down from the phoenix carriage, I saw in his eyes a brilliant galaxy of stars I had never seen before in this life. The first grand palace banquet after becoming the Chen Prince's consort was the New Year's Eve feast at year's end. Chu Yan and I sat side by side, positioned just below the emperor and empress, incredibly prestigious. Halfway through the banquet, I raised my eyes and inadvertently glanced over the seats of the officials below. At the very end, in a position almost near the palace doors, I saw a familiar figure. It was Shen Shuju. He wore an unremarkable green official robe, looking especially shabby among the hall full of crimson, purple, gold, and silver. At the ladies' seats beside him, Su Qingling sat restlessly and uneasily, clearly having never witnessed such a grand spectacle before. During the banquet, when a palace maid poured wine for her, she panicked for some reason and actually knocked over the wine cup, splashing wine onto the skirt of a censor's wife seated next to her. That lady's face immediately changed drastically, and she scolded her mercilessly with a few sharp words. Su Qingling made a fool of herself in public, her face flushing, bright red, tears spinning in her eyes. And Shen Shuju, with a face full of shame and anger, wished he could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. He subconsciously raised his head. His gaze, passing through the layers of crowd, collided with my line of sight in midair. I saw the pain in his eyes, the regret, and the thick, undissolvable jealousy. He looked at me, watched as Prince Chen by my side was thoughtfully serving me food, watched as Her Majesty, the Empress, was gently conversing with me. He saw an entire world that he once had the chance to possess, but had pushed away with his own hands. I just calmly withdrew my gaze and gave a slight smile to Chu Yan by my side. From start to finish, I didn't give him a single extra glance. Indifference is the ultimate contempt. After the New Year's Eve banquet, Shen Shuju's official career came to a complete end. He was impeached by the censor for harboring ill intentions because he quoted an allusion from a banned book of the previous dynasty while compiling historical records. His Majesty flew into a rage and immediately ordered that all his official positions be stripped and he be demoted to a commoner. I knew that behind this, there was father's handiwork, as well as Prince Chen giving it a push. They wouldn't actively harm someone, but when that person made mistakes themselves, they would never give him a chance to make a comeback. This was their silent protection for me. Shen Shuju was driven out of the capital. He and Su Qingling moved to a dilapidated courtyard on the outskirts of the city. The former top scholar, for the sake of making a living, had no choice but to swallow his pride and set up a street stall to write for others. And that Miss Zhao, with her unrestrained talent, finally had to concern herself with daily necessities and cook meals with her own hands. Their literary world romance ultimately became a complete and utter joke. Another spring came. Chu Yan and I took the Prince's Manor carriage out of the city for a spring outing. The carriage arrived at a marketplace and temporarily stopped due to the crowded throng. He casually lifted a corner of the carriage curtain and looked outside. With just one glance, I froze. By the street, in front of a small stall selling calligraphy and paintings, a man and woman were quarreling fiercely. Just these few coins, and you still complain it is not enough. If you hadn't offended so many people back then, how would we have ended up like this? The woman's voice was sharp and harsh. You shut up! If you weren't so embarrassing and disgraceful everywhere, how would I have fallen to this state? The man's voice was full of impatience and resentment. It was Shen Shuju and Su Qingling. Their clothes were worn, their faces haggard, already ground down by life of all elegance and talent, leaving only the ugliness of mutual hatred. Chu Yan followed my gaze, then held my hand. What are you looking at? I shook my head, a faint, relieved smile appearing at the corner of my lips. Nothing much, just saw some insignificant dust. I gently lowered the carriage curtain, shutting out that unbearable sight. The carriage started moving again, rolling smoothly forward. Inside the carriage, it was warm as spring. Outside the carriage, worlds apart, each going their separate ways. Inside the carriage, Chu Yan drew me into his embrace. It is all in the past, he said softly. I leaned against his chest, listening to his steady and strong heartbeat. My heart completely at peace. Yes, it is all in the past. After discarding that eyesore of a fisheye, I finally saw clearly that the true pearl in my life had always been in a higher place, waiting for me to pick it up. No, perhaps it is not about picking it up, rather, when I am excellent enough, strong enough, able to stand at the same height as him, we naturally attract each other and achieve fulfillment together. I raised my head and looked at Chu Yan. He was also looking down at me, his eyes full of tender affection. What are you thinking about? He asked. I smiled and took the initiative to kiss his lips. Thinking that my prince is truly the finest treasure in the world. And this treasure now belongs to me.